Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for March 21st, 2023, around 2 p.m. Eastern Time. First of all, I just want to address the absence. Yes, I've been gone for quite a while here, and I do apologize for that. It's been a very busy last couple of months in my new job and position going and doing solar sales, so I do apologize for that. It's been very busy. But I am back and production is going to start to ramp up on the channel. In fact, I have several projects that are scheduled for the next couple of weeks. So if you guys want to see some of the upcoming projects, stay tuned and I'll have a list of those in the community section sometime later in the next couple of days. So we have a lot to talk about today, but first of all, taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic, as we'd expect for March 21st, all is relatively quiet. Got some dry, stable air across most of the Atlantic basin, as we'd expect for this time of the year. Two storm systems right now, first of all, ongoing across portions of not Central America, but over North America here, over the central United States, and also a storm system. Got a little bit of a low pressure system and associated front ongoing across portions of the west and subtropical Atlantic at this moment in time. The big story, though, however, is what's developing out in the East Pacific Basin over the international date line. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Looking at the sea surface temperature anomaly pattern, this updated as of yesterday, so we're looking at the departures from average. We notice a stark change in the East Pacific Basin, or in really the entirety of the Nino 3-4 area, which is roughly this area out through here. So this is the area for measuring El Nino or La Nina conditions, and we notice a stark difference from last time. The East Pacific Basin has warmed up quite substantially. You no longer see a stretch of colder anomalies stretching across from South America all the way across the date line. And in fact, there's only a few blobs now of cooler than normal temperatures out across the Nino 3-4 area. And in fact, what's happening over here in South America, or close to South America, these warmer anomalies, some of them stretching up to about 2.5 to 3 degrees Celsius, are going to be expanding across the entirety of the Pacific over the next couple of weeks and months. And this is likely to lead to the decline of any cooler than normal anomalies out here. And in fact, we are now officially out of a La Nina according to the Weather Service and the Climate Prediction Center. Now, in the Atlantic Basin, we still do have some pretty warm anomalies. Actually, these are quite substantial, about 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius above the long-term average in most locations. So this will play a role in what will happen for the hurricane season, undoubtedly. But again, this is March 21st and not July 21st. So while these above normal anomalies are here at the moment, again, in reality, these don't really mean a whole lot because this is not later in the season where I'd typically be more inclined to pay attention to what's happening out here. So for all intents and purposes, I'm not really worried about what's out here right now. I'm more focused on the Nino 3-4 area, which is heating up quite nicely. And if you look at the model predictions for the Southern Oscillation here in terms of where we're going to be, so this is kind of currently where we've been observed from December, January, and February, and then we're now on to February here, the observed, which is right about here. We're out of a La Nina now. The threshold is 0.5 degrees Celsius below or 0.5 degrees Celsius above for El Nino and La Nina respectively. And we are now climbing well out of the La Nina phase, and we'll be moving towards this neutral pattern sometime by May and April, somewhere in here. So this is kind of right there, March, April, May, and we'll be kind of seeing the temperatures now moving out of the La Nina and cool neutral into more of a neutral and eventually into this warm neutral / El Nino territory. Now, by the time we get to the peak of hurricane season, which is August, September, October, that's this line right here. Actually drawing pretty a straight line today, so that's actually a good job on me. But this is August, September, October right here. And we notice that the temperature patterns are pretty split for now. We have a camp of El Nino with a weak to kind of borderline moderate El Nino. And then we still have some that are kind of out here in more of the neutral slash warm neutral territory. So there's kind of two camps right now, but the most likely outcome, in my opinion, would be for a weak El Nino to develop sometime by the peak of the hurricane season. In fact, probably looking at June, July, and August and through here being where I think we'll start to see the transition into the El Nino territory. Now, why is El Nino important and why do we talk about it in the hurricane season? Well, for that, I'm going to turn towards some of my illustrations that I drew up today. Basically, we have a lot of warm waters out here across the equatorial Pacific. And what that does, you can see by all the thunderstorm and the rain symbols here, this leads to rising air in this particular area. This leads to a lot of rising air, a lot of thunderstorms. And these thunderstorms then will actually, tower up, all that. And because we generate a low pressure, we generate an area of lower pressure out here in the equatorial Pacific, that means that, well, where does the air pressure tend to go to? It goes from high pressure to low pressure. Well, we end up actually having this pattern where we get the convergence here, and that leads to divergence aloft over here. And so we actually get increased vertical shear and high pressure that generally wants to develop across portions of the Caribbean and the Atlantic Basin. This actually ends up leading, again, towards a stronger wind shear environment and more dry air and subsidence caused by this region of lower pressures over the equatorial Pacific. Now, what this also does is, especially in the wintertime, this changes our jet stream pattern. Right now, we're in a pattern where the jet stream is transitioning with these warmer waters out here in the equatorial Pacific. We generally have a trough over portions of the California area. We get these systems that kind of come in and roll off the Pacific here and generate a lot of thunderstorms, a lot of rain and snow in the Sierra Nevada mountains and up there out towards portions of Utah and such areas where we get those higher elevation storms. A lot of rain along the coast. And then we generally have kind of a split flow pattern where we have kind of a southern part of the jet stream and kind of this northern part that likes to bend something like that. And so we actually have more troughing over here across portions of the East Coast as well, which is why we tend to see more southern U.S. severe weather in El Nino years. And typically we could also end up be dealing with more snowstorms for the coastal regions. Now, of course, by the time we get into El Nino and fully entrenched in that pattern, we'll be well out of the winter months. And so this pattern isn't going to be as, sufficient for these, storms to come in. But it is something we'll have to monitor, especially because we're already in that transition period and we're starting to see a pattern like this kind of set up. Now, if we look here at some of the forecast guidance, this is the climate forecast system, the CFS. We're looking at the sea surface temperature anomaly pattern valid from April to June of this year. And we notice that, again, these warmer than average temperature anomalies across the equatorial Pacific and the date line. And this actually expands as we head through July, August, September. By peak hurricane season here, August, September, October, we are firmly entrenched within an El Nino pattern. Water temperatures here roughly about 1 to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the long-term average, which, again, this would then constitute as a kind of a borderline moderate El Nino pattern. The North American Model Multi-Model Ensemble, NMME for short, also kind of agrees here by peak hurricane season here. We're kind of June, August, September, or July, August, September. We're kind of looking at an El Nino pattern starting to shape up as well. Now, we'll see, though, because this is a little bit weaker here, dealing with kind of a weak El Nino pattern to kind of a warm neutral pattern. And the Atlantic Basin is still warmer than average, but again, we're going to just have to see how this all plays out. One of the very interesting things is the CFS precipitation anomalies for kind of peak hurricane season. we do notice that, again, we have drier precipitation anomalies out across most of the Caribbean and the Atlantic basin down there in the MDR. Maybe some semblance of some subtropical development out here as well. So we'll just have to watch this. Again, not really going to be diving too deep into this at the moment because, again, we still have to get past the spring predictability barrier. So by the time we get in towards late April, going into May, I think we're going to have a much better understanding of what exactly is to be expected for this upcoming hurricane season. So right now, the indications are that we might actually have just a little bit of a quieter season than we've been accustomed to over the past couple of years, which would certainly be a much welcome change. But again, that does not mean that any one particular area is going to be spared. All right. So that being said, I do hope you have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. I just kind of wanted to bring a very quick update to where I've been and kind of give some of the highlights for this off-season forecasting here. But again, we'll be starting out more of our long-form content here probably within the next couple of weeks as I start to transition back into more of this routine. All right. That being said, have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. And I'll talk to you guys again some more over the next several weeks.